Welcome, you're watching Vox News, your daily evening news with Rita Kamkumo.
Our headlines today: the president of Ivory Coast publicly condemns the opposition's call for civil disobedience ahead of the presidential election. Muslim demonstrators in Mogadishu burned the French flag in protest against France's defense of the publication of cartoons depicting the Prophet Muhammad. Cameroon declares a day of national mourning in honor of the victims of last week's deadly shooting at a school. Our top story today: Ivory Coast's President Alassane Ouattara condemned the opposition's call for civil disobedience on Wednesday, just 3 days before the presidential election. The incumbent president, who is running for a contested third term in Saturday's election, accused the opposition of sending supporters to their deaths, referring to the bloody unrest that erupted in the country since he announced that he was running again.
The opposition have to stop sending young people to their death. You know, the investigations are going to go all the way, and all those who are responsible will go to court, whatever the rank of the person. I deplore the 30 or so deaths, half of them in Dabo. So it was inter-community clashes that led to this, and I find that regrettable. I don't see why the opposition is calling for civil disobedience.
Opposition candidates Henri Conan-Bédier and Pascal Affinguesson argue that Ouattara's third-term bid is illegal and goes against the spirit of the Ivorian constitution that sets a two-term limit for each president. Both candidates have been putting pressure on the government by advocating an active boycott of the electoral process, though they have not officially withdrawn their candidacies from the ballot.
Why would it lack legitimacy? These gentlemen have submitted their applications to the Independent Electoral Commission. Their candidatures were approved by the Constitutional Council, institutions they recognized, and all of a sudden they say, no, we don't want to go to the elections anymore. But nothing says in the Constitution, the Electoral Code, that you have to have 4 candidates to all elections. At the moment, 41% of people have withdrawn their cards, and we encourage the others to go to the polling stations on election day to collect their cards, and we will make sure that people participate. If more than 40% of people participate, it will be better than what they did when Bédier and Gbagbo ran alone against other people. Bertin Kouadio-Conan is a candidate, but I have an important candidate in front of me. Of course, I wish I had Bédier and Affinguesson to beat them again. I am sorry, but it is their decision.
Bertin Kouadio-Conan, one of the 4 candidates in the presidential election, urged Ivorian citizens to vote on Saturday, saying that deserting the polls is not the solution to put an end to the government of Alassane Ouattara. In neighboring Guinea, opposition leader Cellou Dalein Diallo on Wednesday confirmed the lifting of a blockade put in place by the police around his residence as well as the premises of his party after he declared himself the winner of the presidential election of the 18th of October. He denounced an electoral hold-up by President Alpha Condé, who was reappointed for a controversial third term by obtaining 59% of the votes.
I don't want people to consider that this easing, if we can call it that, should obscure the objective we have, that of fighting until victory, the victory that we acquired in the ballot boxes, and of refusing by all means the electoral hold-up that Mr. Alpha Condé is in the process of preparing. There's nothing behind it except the will to intimidate the opponents so that we don't claim our victory. But believe me, he was wrong, because this claim, this fight for the recognition of our victory will be carried to the end. There will be no compromise.
Mediators from the African Union and the Economic Community of West African States, who had urged the Guinean government to lift the blockade of Diallo's home, had earlier said that the presidential election was mostly fair. The opposition leader has vowed to take the matter to Guinea's constitutional court. Meanwhile, in Guinea, President Alpha Condé made his first public appearance since the election of the 18th of October. The newly re-elected president on Wednesday paid a visit to the security forces who had been injured in the clashes that followed the election.
I wanted to see the various victims, both law enforcement officials and civilians. I know that many of the law enforcement agencies were shot with buckshot. Thank God, both the military and civilians, our doctors made extremely great efforts, even miracles, because they were able to save everyone. It was very important for me to know the situation of these patients in order to see exactly, and I congratulate and thank our doctors for the care they gave to all these victims, regardless of whether they were military or civilian. This is extremely important for us because all Guineans are equal before the health and the law.
State television reported on Monday that 21 people had been killed in the unrest following the disputed presidential election. On the economic front, the South African government on Wednesday announced the release of the equivalent of $638 million to fund a rescue plan for the ailing state-owned airline South African Airways. The request was placed under state-approved administration in December last year, following years of mismanagement and rising debt. The finance minister, Tito Mboweni, said that the move was not a bailout, but part of the government's responsibilities as a shareholder, and that the payment will be funded through cuts in spending elsewhere in other public entities and conditional grants. The objective is to grow back to 26 planes by the end of 2021 and rehire 1,000 furloughed employees. On the international scene, France has become the target of a fresh wave of anger in the Muslim world after French President Emmanuel Macron defended the right to mock religion following the murder of a French schoolteacher over nude cartoons of Prophet Muhammad he had shown in class. Macron's recent comments have triggered protests and a call to boycott French goods in some Muslim-majority countries. On Wednesday, Muslim demonstrators in Somalia marched and burned the French flag in the capital Mogadishu in response to Paris' defense of the publication of such cartoons considered blasphemous in Islam.
Today we came out to protest the publication of cartoons on the Prophet Muhammad, peace of Allah be upon him. We are sad as Muslims and we'll never accept that. There is no God but God. Muhammad is the messenger of God.
Because of his ignorance, he made a big mistake. If he knew the shrine and high degree of the Prophet, he wouldn't have done that. So we don't want to insult him, but we call on the President of France to embrace Islam.
While Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi called for an end to the Prophet Muhammad being the target of what he described as insults in the name of free speech, thousands of Muslim worshippers gathered on Wednesday in the Great Mosque of Mali's capital city Bamako to protest and demand that Macron apologizes to the global Muslim community.
It's a statement that has put the Muslim world in turmoil. I really think that Emmanuel is a great leader of this contemporary world. He did not need to make such a statement. I really think that today the world is in a situation where men like him must be reasonable because the world needs peace.
The High Islamic Council of Mali asks, 1. For Mr. Emmanuel Macron to apologize to the Muslim community of the world, 2. The immediate banning of all publications of caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and salvation on him, in France, 3. The immediate cessation of closures of Muslim places of worship and the dissolution of Muslim structures in France and the intimidation of their leaders.
The French government has vowed to continue supporting caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad that they say are protected under freedom of expression in France. Meanwhile, in Mali, 2 jihadists were found guilty and sentenced to death by a Bamako court on Wednesday for the killing of over 24 people in attacks targeting Westerners in the capital city in 2015. Fawaz Ould Ahmed, a Mauritanian national, and his Malian co-defendant Sadou Chaka were handed the death sentences at the end of 2 days of hearings. Ould Ahmed told the court that he had carried out one of the attacks in revenge for cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad by French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo. In Cameroon, President Paul Biya on Wednesday declared a day of national mourning in honor of the victims of last week's deadly shooting at a school in the city of Kumba. At least 7 children were killed and a dozen injured after gunmen attacked a bilingual school in the English-speaking southwest region, plagued by a violent conflict between Anglophone separatists and government forces. According to a presidential decree, the national flag is expected to fly at half-mast on the 31st of October throughout the country. Meanwhile, the Cameroon Peace Movement, a citizens' initiative bringing together Cameroonian artists of all regions and calling for the end of the Anglophone crisis, is urging all Cameroonians to come together and raise their voices for peace and unity. On the football scene, the president of the Confederation of African Football, Ahmad Ahmad, confirmed on Wednesday that he is running for a second 4-year term. The announcement came after 46 of the 54 member associations had requested his re-election. The presidency election is set to take place in Rabat, Morocco in March 2021. Ahmad is, however, running despite being the subject of an ongoing FIFA ethics inquiry, which has the potential to derail his re-election bid.
That's it for today. Thank you for watching Vox News.